Okay. Yeah, so thank you very much, everybody, for joining our webinar, which is a joint webinar between Appian and Mastodon this go around, that we are calling Meeting Production Demand with Increased Certainty in Your Supply Chain. So very excited for this one. It's something that we've looked forward to doing for a long time. A quick note about just general logistics. As we have questions and things going through the webinar, it's going to be very conversational at first. So feel free to drop any questions into the question and answer panel. I'll do my best to try and get to them as we're going through, or if it feels like it makes a little bit more sense, I'll hold the question to the end of the discussion, where we have at the end of the presentation some time set aside for doing some question and answer. But with that, very excited to introduce our guest. So Gary, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Sure. Good day, everyone. Gary Cassell. I'm the industry lead for manufacturing and automotive at Appian. So I have responsibility for our go-to-market strategies in those two particular industries. And prior to joining Appian, I spent 23 years in the industry. And prior to that, I was in the work across multiple industries in a consulting mode, but mostly say the broad part of what I did was mainly in manufacturing and distribution.
Great. Thank you. And to do a quick introduction of ourselves and kind of a bit about how we got here. So first I'll introduce myself. My name is Colin Schoenfelder. I'm a director at Mastodon. I've done a number of these kinds of webinars, and the one that we're doing today is really to showcase an industry spotlight on a particular solution that we have built to meet a problem that we have seen in the market a couple of different times. And so I've overseen a lot of that kind of solution development. And with me is Kenny, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Kenny Rosenberg, Senior Solutions Consultant at Mastodon, been with Mastodon for a couple of years now, and I've been a part of the delivery of a lot of the solutions that we provide. And I've had a lot of hands-on experience working with manufacturing clients and clients who have a need in addressing supply chain concerns, which is why I'm here speaking about this particular solution today.
Great, thank you. And I think that, just kind of give a little bit more context on the kinds of solutions that we build. So at Mastodon, we have implemented a lot of different types of workflows and a lot of different types of solutions across a number of different industries. And that very much includes the manufacturing space. As we have, built those different solutions out and we see patterns emerge among similar kinds of problems that we see, we try to containerize those into our own solutions to really try and accelerate the delivery process for any future prospects who might be interested in trying to solve a similar problem. And the solution that Kenny is going to demonstrate later on in the presentation is going to be one of those. But really, we wanted to try and get started just by introducing a little bit of the problems that people are seeing in supply chain and just get a bit of that discussion and hear from Gary with his expertise on what some of the common problems that people are facing and some of the things that they're doing in order to try and resolve some of those issues. And so with that, can we just kind of get started? I'd love to get away from the PowerPoint and just hear, Gary, can you talk a little bit about some of the kinds of issues that people are running into in the manufacturing space right now?
Yeah, certainly. And there's a lot of those. So, I'm going to sort of scale this down to just what I think are some of the largest issues that manufacturing organizations face or experience in today's business climate. And, one, we hear a lot about this, right? The continued supply chain disruptions, whether that comes in material shortages or delays in production, capacity issues in transportation. And that drives on to the cost issues that come with that. So lots of cost pressures that manufacturers face today. Also, raw material costs are increasing, energy, labor costs. When you talk about labor, you can never forget or never not mention the labor shortages that manufacturing faces today. That labor gap is, of course, impacting productivity as well as profitability. There's also, the environmental regulations. Consumers continue to become more environmentally conscious, and that puts pressure on manufacturers to really reduce their environmental impact. And then there's the changing customer demands, and some of those demands are, deliver it faster, right? Those customer demands continue to evolve, and manufacturers need to stay ahead of the curve in order to remain relevant. So overall, what we're really talking about, I think, in what we'll see and what Kenny will show us today is, the manufacturers need to be agile and adaptable to address these kind of business issues to really remain competitive and to deliver to customers in today's business climate.
Great. Yeah, definitely that push and pull of, consumers, especially over, the pandemic, really wanting to get a lot of things delivered, but then the supply chain issues that are, hindering that from actually occurring. What kinds of things are people doing to adapt, and those issues in the supply chain currently? Like how do people manage those inconsistencies in the supply, but the demand on the other side being, higher than ever?
Yeah, and again, I mean, there's several things that manufacturers are doing today. A couple of a common one, right, is a lot of manufacturers are diversifying their supply base. Moving from sort of the single sourced on critical products or components to multiple, dual or multiple sourcing. That drives a little bit of complexity, right, in the whole supply base. One that, as I talk to some manufacturing leaders, they're increasing some of their inventory levels, creating that sort of buffer approach. But it's a costly option because, that kind of approach, it's costly not only to the manufacturer, but also the supply base, because it tends to really artificially increase demand on suppliers. And at some point, there's a price to pay for that. And manufacturers are working to collaborate more closely with suppliers. So it's really that move away from what I would call the traditional just transactional environment to actually sharing information, being sharing the workflow, being part of an end-to-end process versus just you get a transaction and you execute on a transaction and you're really not doing it together. It's more of a silo type approach. And we hear a lot today. I'm sure everyone has heard, digitization. So digitization of the supply chain or the operational space. And manufacturers are adopting and investing in digital technologies to improve that supply chain visibility and efficiency. But and overall, that's really meant to where manufacturers are trying to get is in a proactive space. So they can identify or forecast or understand when a issue is coming, same for the suppliers, and actually have the ability to mitigate that before it has a production or delivery impact. And Colin, as you kind of, when I think about inconsistencies, what I normally see there that drives a lot of the inconsistencies is when, there's so many different processes that are offline. And I think that, talking to different organizations, it's really driven by the fact that, they're in this environment of siloed data, siloed systems. They don't really talk to one another. So these offline sort of, I call them hidden factory processes sort of develop. And you end up going two paths with this. One is, I've seen the path of sort of the complex integrations in, let's say, the source ERP systems that make it, again, you're very difficult as you go down the road in the future to do upgrades. They're costly, they're difficult to do because there's so many customizations in there. The other side of it is when you don't go that way and you keep them offline and manual with these hidden factories, is as people move, through an organization, they take the knowledge of that hidden factory with them, and it's almost a start over for whoever comes in and backfills those kind of positions.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when you have you're halfway into the middle of that digitization process, like you're describing, and then you also have a lot of those manual processes as well. There's a lot of friction in just trying to maintain those things together, and the digital processes might have very specific things that they need that is known by some, resources, and some of that information is lost as people move around. There's just an endless amount more to, organize and keep managed when you're trying to meet, those accelerated timelines, that consumers expect. And so I'm curious, from what you've seen, then what kinds of capabilities can manufacturers invest in to try and increase that agility and trying to continue that ability to deliver even with the supply chain issues?
Yeah, no, great question. And I think another part of that question is also, how do you make the investments? Because I'm going to talk about some of those digitization technologies, right? How do you make those investments and not find yourself in this position of, I've got multiple products that I've invested in. Now I've got to try and tie them together. And I end up with this very complex integration landscape that almost does the opposite of what I'm after when we think about agility and flexibility and the ability to move and change fast. And this is where, and I just read I thought a really good McKinsey report on this too, but this is where I see the platform play, providing those digital capabilities that manufacturers need to really drive change to get to to deliver on the need or the desire to be agile, flexibility, and address those supply chain issues proactively. And and the one thing I would add, as manufacturers look at sort of the platform play, they should also ensure that any platform being looked at, right, is enterprise scalable, and it has those capabilities that enable me to drive, whether it's hyper automation but it doesn't create this really complex integration landscape. And I think of those sort of I'm going to talk about 6 quick things. So one, the ability for that, having that platform, that capability to unify siloed data. And I'm not talking about building data warehouses or data lakes. Hey, great that I can access those too, but being able to go to those source systems and be in a real-time mode, because I want to make real-time decisions on transactions where I've got a risk of a production outage or the inability to deliver to a customer. Being able to have the tools in one place that are already tied together to enable end-to-end hyper automation across the process. Connecting internal as well as external stakeholders. So making those suppliers part of the workflow, the sharing information and resources that I talked about before. The ability to have to be in that platform and mine those processes to discover not just how well am I performing, but where are some of those areas that I can perform better. And I like to kind of refer to this as sort of giving, on the employee experience side, give them that 360-degree view in one place, all the information they need to make the decision and then execute on that decision. And, I always feel like it's important to mention low code as a capability needed also, because the low code piece of it is really critical to accelerating that path to increased agility, as well as accelerating the time to value of those capabilities that you put in place.
Yeah, and it's always fascinating to me how these kinds of problems and the ones that you have specifically in a manufacturing or a supply chain environment, how a lot of them are so similar to a lot of the other problems that you might see in a lot of different industries.
Oh, very much so.
That platform play and having something which is able to connect to all those different systems allows you to make everything far more efficient. And in this space, I'm definitely very happy that we've gotten some experience in this and can take some of the experience that we have from other use cases into this. And with that, I'll kind of transfer over to Kenny, who is going to share us a little bit about the solution that itself that we've created that we think is going to be quite helpful for things in the supply chain and manufacturing space to address some of those issues. So
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the introduction. And Gary, thanks for kind of laying the landscape out for us. I think there's no mistake here that when we sought to develop a solution that's going to accelerate the process of solving these issues, we consulted industry experts. We talked to our prospects about what they're looking for in our previous clients and aggregated something that I think solves for a lot of the things that Gary just mentioned. So a lot of unification of data and parties who need access to the system, and a real focus around executing and being able to take action rather than just more and more analytical tools. And I will say that what I'm about to show is just one of a suite of applications, accelerators, and tools that Mastodon has put together in this space. I wanted to use this as an example. It's the newest of the bunch, But the idea here is that this is just one entry point for solving the problem. It's not the end all be all. You're not going to solve your problems with just one technical tool. But what you do want to do is choose something that's going to be able to unify together. And as I go through, Gary, feel free to interrupt me, highlight any industry points that you see as a good fit here. I'm just going to share screen really quickly.
And as he's doing that, I'll also comment. I have one question that somebody has already asked that I think is a good thing to put to at the end. Feel free to put any questions and answers, or questions rather, in the questions panel, and we can try and get through those as we go through this as well.
Did you say that you wanted to present the question, or we're just letting everybody know?
I think that it's a good fit for the end of the discussions panel, but
Gotcha.
we can go through for now.
Okay, yeah, no worries. So without burying the lead here, the material supply management tool is the one I wanted to present today. As an early hint of where we stand with this, this is already available on the Appian app marketplace as something that you can find screenshots and a deeper description of what the capabilities are. Maybe something I won't get through completely in today's demonstration. It's also a great place to reach back out to us for further deep dives or demonstrations after the webinar today. But you'll also be able to find some of the other solutions that I mentioned that will help in this space, and know that we actually have more coming down the pipeline as well. So just wanted to get that out there first. And now I'm going to go ahead and set the stage here. What does this solution seek to help with specifically? This is going to be for helping manage your production attainment, as you could probably have guessed from the name of the webinar, but it's going to do that in a really specific way. We want to make sure that we're offering a solution that helps you reach the agility that manufacturers are striving for now. That's one of the big buzzwords. But what does it mean? It means that we want to be acting on foresight as often as possible. But in the cases where we can't, we want to have the best information to act reactively. And this acts together as one system to take care of that. In the case where we're trying to get our materials from our suppliers so that we can then produce our inventory and then distribute that around our network. And so what industry is doing right now is either working with a variety of different technologies, ERP systems that have analytical tools attached to them. A lot of people are honestly working off of spreadsheets, and there's no shame there, but it doesn't scale well. And we're relying really heavily on planners and relationships with suppliers that have existed for sometimes decades. And Gary mentioned this briefly, but if you have motion within your organization of your employees, and they're no longer in that role and capacity, you can't leverage that anymore. And even worse, we call it the lottery concern, which is one of your employees wins the lottery and then they leave. What are you going to do with all that knowledge that was just lost? So what we sought to establish was a much more consistent way to interact with your suppliers to check in on the status of shipments of key materials. As of right now, you would have to pick up the phone and compare your invoices to the purchase orders and make sure that everything's aligned, things are arriving on the expected date. And you're really sort of crossing your fingers, making sure that you're making those phone calls is kind of problematic, because if you forget or you get that call too close to the expected delivery date, there's not enough time to actually take any action to prevent the fallout if something goes wrong. And that's where all these supply constraints are going to play out. So that's where we're starting. We're saying things are really inconsistent. How can we improve on that? And so I'm going to go ahead and switch the screen and start showing the solution. And the entry point here is that we are starting as one of our suppliers. And Gary actually just mentioned this, but being able to unify the different groups that will participate in this process is a great thing to focus on when you're building a system like this, because we might have some access point for our planners and our manufacturing leads, but if we can't communicate effectively with the source of the materials, that's not going to help us a whole lot. And so the solution that we've built here comes with an entry point, a portal for our suppliers. And you could distribute out access to as many suppliers as you might need to. And what I'm logged in as right now is one of those suppliers. And what we aren't looking at is that prior to logging in, we can imagine I, as the supplier, have just received an email. an automated email that you would set up to be distributed on a life cycle, let's say maybe 2 to 3 weeks prior to the expected delivery. Hey, supplier, am I going to get my expected delivery on time? Is it going to come in the expected quantities and when I expect it? And if not, I'd like you to tell me what's going to deviate if possible. And previously that would have been an email or on the phone, but we're going to add a lot more structure to it. So giving them a nice clean dashboard is going to make their lives easier. It's going to be a much simpler ask to say to your suppliers, hey, would you mind using our system for this communication? It's actually really easy to use. So we try to keep things really simple for their dashboard. You can see it's just a couple high-level numbers about the quantity of items in different statuses, how many orders we're expecting and in what quantities. A notification system that prompts you with just the most important items to take care of at any given moment. And we'll follow up on this in just a second. And then if there's any conversations going on, we like to remove that conversation from email because that locks it down to specific people who can view it. The conversation is trapped between whoever's in that thread. Somebody goes on vacation, you lose access to it, and it's not connected directly to the orders that you're discussing either. And so what we do in this system is we say, every message is connected to the thing you're talking about. This is an order we're discussing, and these are tagged with flags that say that they're high risk. It really makes it easier to have a conversation when the content that you're concerned about is in the same place. Another reflection back on what Gary had mentioned, we want to unify the data across your systems together, and that's going to include things that would typically take place in email. The conversations should be here as well. And then finally, if I need visibility of this, I can see all of my orders with this particular manufacturer and when their expected delivery dates are. I could kind of jump the gun and give updates on things I'm not being asked to give updates on. But we're going to follow the simplest possible case here. Like I said, I just received an email. It's automatically sent out on a specific cadence. I believe it's configured to be about 3 weeks prior to the delivery date. And it says, hey, can you come in and confirm that this order is going to play out as expected? And so when I click into this, I'm going to get even more granular detail about the specific order. I'm going to see the individual line items, their estimated arrival dates if they differ, as well as any statuses that are relevant, and then the conversation, as I mentioned, as it has played out for this particular order. In the interest of speeding up the demo, I've added a couple extra comments here and there, just so that you can see what they would look like. But this is a great place for me to add more detail if I need to. But as a reminder, I'm coming in here to say, yes, confirmed. You will get about 1,020 units of these materials on the expected delivery date. You can rely on me. And this is giving an opportunity for it to deviate here, but also a really easy way for me to just click twice, boom, boom, order is confirmed. The manufacturer is given certainty that they can rely on their production plan to reach that attainment they're looking for. But that's not the interesting case. We want to deal with when things go wrong. And so I am the supplier and I want to make a revision. Unfortunately, I'm supply constrained. I'm not going to be able to get these materials to you on the originally agreed upon date. And so I want to come here and make a revision. And rather than this being totally open-ended, the content of an email or a phone conversation that isn't documented, when I use the system to do this, there's a full audit trail of who took the action, when it was done, what was changed. And so if things do deviate significantly, that can get routed back to an invoicing process to make adjustments if needed, approvals, whatever you might need. The key point here is I can come in here and say, hey, this oak veneer or whatever it may be, I'm going to get you your full quantity, but it's not going to be on the 30th like we had originally thought. It'll be a couple days later on the 3rd. And the same will be true for about half of the volume of this other material. We'll say you'll get half on the 3rd as well. And then I'm going to give you the rest of it the Friday following. And unfortunately, this is sort of the best I can do. And this is giving me a very structured way to let you know. And if I have more detail to add, I can use the messaging system, tag individual users, add tags. And there's a lot more capability that could be added here as well. But like I said, we want to keep things really straightforward and allow the message to meet the manufacturer where they are and give them the heads up. I will take this opportunity to mention this. I'm going to mention it a couple times, that This system is mainly designed to manage exceptions around the delivery of materials. We want to make sure that this really specific case is handled very well, but we don't want you to have to bail on any existing investments that you've made in ERP systems. Nobody's asking that to happen. And so all of the information on the orders that we've seen, including the content that we're looking at right here, would likely be sourced from that external ERP. Maybe it's SAP or some other technology that you're using. And to that end, included with this also, we're working towards building pre-built connectors using MuleSoft that will make this information available and retrievable from SAP. But that also means that it would be pretty easy for us to communicate the information back to the supplier. So you're originally asking them to do you a favor. Hey, please use my system to give us updates about these orders. And as an added benefit, if they want these updates pushed to their system, that can be done as well. And that's the advantage of using a platform to take care of these things. So I'm going to go ahead and say, this is the best I can do on this order and submit my revisions. And it's going to just give me a heads up. Hey, Macedon's going to be told about this. You sure you want to proceed? It's not going to just disappear. And you say, of course, this is how things are going to go. I say, yes. And we're going to get an update to the status here that this is now an order that needs attention. It's now been flagged for my manufacturing partner. They're going to see this. If I need to make additional changes, I can always revisit this. But the next step is to pick things back up as the manufacturer. So I'm just going to switch screens really quickly. And we'll see a different view here, although it looks very similar. And I'm now logged in as one of our supply planners for a manufacturing site or a whole domain of our facilities across North America, perhaps. You can see my dashboard has a little bit of extra information and some verbiage has changed. What's important to me when I'm trying to resolve issues like this is that I get access to what has changed, when it was changed, that I get flagged when things are brand new. And also, I want to keep a close eye on how well I'm doing at making sure our production attainment stays high, because that's my main focus. And so what we've done is we've added KPIs here at the top to make sure that every time I log in, I can check to see how well we're doing. It's kind of my report card at any given moment. We can see through the usage of our system, we've been able to maintain pretty high production attainment, but we can also aggregate information about inventory on hand and the investment we've put into that inventory. And then also keeping track of the drain on my cost center. Whenever I'm taking actions to handle these exceptions, there's typically cost associated with that. And that's within reason. It's going to cost us money to sometimes handle these things. But I want to track that to make sure I'm not going over budget or being extravagant about my solutions. I want to be efficient. And then beyond that, we're seeing a lot of the same stuff. We see high-level notifications. We see, I need to respond to an exception. This is the one that we just received from TimberTech, the supplier that just entered those details. And then the same idea, messaging system for recent messages associated with any of these records. And then we just have a change in nomenclature, whereas suppliers would see these as orders. As the planner, I can view orders, everything that's in the system, but on my dashboard, I want to see what's gone wrong because these are the things I want to address first. And I also have a default filter applied to show me only the things that are brand new that have come in. But if I want to see things that are in progress or already being managed, I could view those as well. And even search among the orders for individual orders. Here, there's only 4 new alerts, but you could imagine your system could be pretty flooded depending on the responsibilities of this individual. So like I said, to follow up on the exception that was just created by our supplier, I can go to the alert section. I may have also received an email. We've even done things like send people text messages or integrated with Slack so that whatever you're using for communication lets you know as soon as possible, because a lot of the time, these constraints are going to be time sensitive to make sure your production attainment doesn't take a dip. So if I go ahead and I click into the exception here, we're going to be dropped into a pretty powerful set of details that allows me to take follow-up action. As one of the employees of the manufacturing company, this is a lot more powerful than what the suppliers can do, but we see a lot of the same information. One, we see the status of the brand new exception that it just got fired over. We see the impact date. This is when we are likely to be affected on our production plan because the original drop date for the materials was the 30th, and it doesn't seem like that's the case anymore. And our facility that is likely to be affected as well if I oversee more than one. We can see all of the related messages if there's a conversation I want to be apprised to. And then below, key information here is that I can see what the new status of the order is, and if I'd like to see it, the order history, what it looked like prior. And so anything in red here is a deviation from the norm, whereas we can see it was originally 900 of this, and now it's kind of split in half and cut across multiple days. But here's the crux and the whole meat of the application here and why this is valuable. Previously, I would have had to use my industry knowledge to decide what to do. I pick up the phone, I call another supplier, I cancel this order, I see if I can get more material in-house from somewhere else. I leverage my larger network if I can do that. But I need to make all of those decisions from my own knowledge, and there's no consistency to that. And so what we've done here is introduce artificial intelligence to help guide that decision-making. And so what we can see below the details of the exception is a list of possible responses, as well as one that has been identified as the recommended option. And we could go beyond this and extend it beyond just the top 3. But just alone, this is going to give me a lot more certainty about my decision-making. And at the very least, it's going to give me as much information as possible to make the decision on my own. So among the possible actions I can take to respond to this original deviation is 1, to ship more material from within my manufacturing network. I have other facilities in North America that are within driving distance for a freight shipment, and it's possible that they have surplus of the materials I need to keep up with my own plan. And that seems to be the recommended option, but we'll just kind of take a glance at some of these others, which is I could reallocate inventory across my distribution network and take the loss on the production for a couple days while we wait for the material. And it gives us a predicted value loss if that's relevant to me. I think it is, as well as what the delay is expected to be to the production plan. And because there's kind of an extravagant value loss to this, we see that this would require approval from a managing director or some other entity. And then the last piece here is if cost is the restraint on why I can't get the materials in time, we could try to expedite shipment. Maybe this is from another supplier, maybe from the same. It depends on what it is that is preventing us from getting this delivery on time. But we can see that the predicted cost for this is pretty significant and also would require approval. So I could just go ahead and start with the recommended option and just obey the system. It knows best. But I've been an employee here for a while, and I want to try to consider all my options before I just choose that. And so in addition to just the base level details here, we have visibility into the production plan itself. And I don't need to be an expert on how this plan is structured. And again, this is a piece that is pulled from your existing ERP system to show a simplified version of the production plan. It's not a replacement for any of your planning tools. It is a way to help guide the decision-making on the exception handling, but it does give us really good insight. It's going to show us all of the different affected products by that material shortage. It's typically not just one. We're making sure to be efficient with the materials that we're ordering, as well as what the expected change in production capacity is against demand over time. And so we can see that originally on the 30th, we were green. We were ready to go, and our production demand was keeping up with our capacity. But because of this shipment delay, we see that we're going to, on the 1st, be unable to keep up with that demand. And so this is a good way for me to visualize how this is going to play out if I don't do anything. We want to see the result of inaction so we can understand the value of acting. And in addition to just being able to visualize this, I can sandbox it. So if I click this button, I can enter a sandboxing mode. And this is a very simplified version of this. We have complex versions available as well. But I can see how this would play out. Well, obviously, if I moved my delivery date back to when it was expected to be, everything plays out fine. And this sort of indicates to me that there's a cost increase of moving the shipment that's reflective of paying for expedited shipment or whatever it may be. And maybe that's not realistic. And I just want to see how much would I have to reduce my production demand by to go green again, where I'm actually keeping up with that demand. So I can kind of skirt the line and see, well, I don't have to drop the demand to 0 starting on the 30th. I have some buffer. And so when I go to present my decision to any managers or anyone who cares about the ability to keep up with production, I can demonstrate the fact that I've played with the numbers, I've made the best decision because the alternative was untenable. And this is just one way to work with that, as well as the option to go with an auto rebalance feature that's going to help you make those numbers without just kind of ticking them up and down. And then finally, the last piece of information currently available here is inventory at other sites. Because we're sharing technology within our organization, there's no reason I shouldn't be able to see the status of our other facilities, because this is going to get me better insight into which is the best destination to pull surplus resources from. And the system has already made a recommendation to take this action, but this allows me to look into specific sites and see, well, Ohio seems to be the destination that has everything I need, whereas maybe our Austin site or the one in New York has a partial ability to help us keep up. But I don't want to pay for the freight shipment just to get half my problem solved, so probably not the best option. And this also calculates some other values using Google Maps integrations and does a rough estimation of shipping costs before we make a decision. And you could imagine adding even more detail to here, aggregating information from a variety of different sources to inform your decision-making at the highest level. But in order to most effectively address this issue, I think I actually agree with what the AI is recommending here, which is...
And Kenny, I would just add one thing, just a clarification. And you'd mentioned that, hey, this data, coming from SAP, a lot of the manufacturers that I talk with, they'll have an array of ERP systems across their infrastructure. And, it's unifying those multiple systems too, not just, a single instance that it can pull from and unify and create those relationships, but it's looking across all. That's I think that's a key point that folks ought to understand in this case.
Yeah, it's a good point. You can have really misleading information when you have multiple systems fighting for who owns the data. And we can kind of split the difference in a lot of cases to make sure that you either have access to all of it or actually just what is correct, which is the most helpful. Yeah, thanks for adding that. So in order to close the loop on the action here as the planner, I want to make sure that I get the materials in the most effective way possible. I've decided that the action I want to take is to just borrow from my own inventory. And in a lot of cases with existing systems and technologies that people are using, that's the end of it. I had an analytical tool that helped me make the decision. I close it and I pick up the phone and I start making arrangements for that. But as Gary mentioned, and what we wanted to focus on is executing on that decision making. We offered your suppliers a way to communicate to you that information, not just view it. And we want to give you the power to actually make the changes necessary to these shipments from the same system that you're making your decisions in. And so when you select the recommended option here to ship materials from another site, it's going to automatically populate it with the best possible recommendation, which we had seen also was, let's get this order fulfilled from our own Cleveland, Ohio location. It has an estimated cost, although we can iron this out later. And then it's giving us the earliest possible delivery date, which would be tomorrow because it's within a stone's throw. But we can probably reduce the cost because we don't actually need the supply to show up until our impact date. And so I can make edits to this and say, you know what, we're not super time constrained on this. Let's push it out to the 30th. And it's going to give us a predicted cost savings. And that makes us feel even better about doing this from our internal network. We can actually reduce the cost even more. And what this also allows us to do behind the scenes, because this will actually create an internal order that looks just like a supplier order for our internal team so that we make sure we get the shipment on time. But being able to move out the delivery date is really valuable because if another exception comes up before the shipment needs to exit that yard, we have the ability to aggregate things together and make ride-alongs. And that makes it so that the next time this happens, we have no costs essentially because the freight is going to be flat rate in a lot of cases. We also see that the values that we need are pre-populated here. If I have some other mechanism that I want to make decisions about, I can change it or even add other materials. But this is really going to close the loop for me. The supplier identified a constraint. They were unable to meet a delivery deadline. I was notified about it with plenty of time to take care of the issue before the production plan was impacted. And then within the same system that managed all of that communication, I was able to generate an internal order to receive that material from another source. In this case, it was from my own site. It could be from another supplier or even a lot of other options. But just by clicking this one button, it's been taken care of. I can kind of rest assured that the exception has at least currently been addressed. And unless some other exception is raised, even by the internal order, I can be confident that my production attainment is going to keep up with what's expected. So that's the bulk of what I wanted to show. I did want to leave time for questions, and I said I would remind everybody again at the end, but as a reminder, this is already available on the app marketplace for you to take a look at this on your own, as well as reach out to us for your personalized version of the demo, as well as other solutions in the same space that can be aggregated together to improve even more, including things like supply planning and operations, which allows you to effectively distribute the results of a process like this across your network within the States or abroad. And there's more coming. I think this is a really exciting space to be in with a platform like this that can help solve problems in the way that Gary has outlined, where you're unifying data, you're unifying personnel, and you're able to get all of that in one place and take action on that information as well. So I'll pass it back to Colin to kind of throw questions out there if any have come in. Oh, you're muted. Caught you off guard.
Thank you very much, Kenny. And I will share my screen again. So we did get one question, that was in the beginning, which I think is still relevant. It was asking about, so I guess, the relationship between Appian and this solution, and I guess what the difference was. And so if that wasn't clear through this, so Appian is actually the platform that this solution is built on, which is great because it has all of the advantages of, using the Appian platform, how easy it is to connect to other systems, how quickly you can make changes and implement them. And then, it has the advantage of, you get to start from a very significant place forward if you are going to be implementing this on part of, your organization. So hopefully that answers the question. And that was the only one that we had now. If anybody has any last minute questions as we are wrapping up, feel free to enter them. But otherwise, thank you very much for that demo, Kenny. It was very exciting to get to show this. It's been a great application to get to work on, and I think it could be something that can really add a lot of value to a lot of different organizations. And for everybody else, make sure to follow us. We definitely have a lot of these kinds of webinars. We're coming out with different solutions in different industries, all the time as we come up with them. And then also just, various topics on how people have, accomplished their delivery for other organizations beforehand. And so just a lot of good things that we, tend to go through in these kinds of webinars. So definitely check us out.